True story?
Yeah, dang it.
Yeah, I got you,
You got
this
me this
time.
time. Dang it.
That's right. This is take 2 for us.
Yeah.
So I learned my lesson.
I should have been. Why was I not expecting that?
I
That
don't-
was just
I don't know.
attempted. I don't
I don't
know.
know. This is going to be a thing now. The pre-air shenanigans.
Okay.
It's going to be a thing now.
Yeah.
We're going to see, man. We're going to see who the real man is.
I have follow-up questions, but I think.
Peyton, are we recording? You're
Yes.
positive about this? All right. This is our
Awesome.
take 2. We've actually done this show twice now.
Right.
I don't know where. Okay. How's the weather, Andrew?
The weather is amazing.
Yeah.
I am wearing shoes without socks. I am just breaking all the rules because we're in California.
I hate your people. I really
Your
do.
people.
I do.
Yeah.
You're non-sock wearing people.
Mm-hmm.
I hate your people. It
You
weirds
know-
me out. It gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah. I didn't. This was a practice that I abhorred myself. However,
It just doesn't
Of
seem
late, it's-
sanitary.
well, I don't do it like all day. So if I'm like going to be out all day, I don't do this. That's like a sock day. But if I'm like just going to go like run a quick errand or do something,
This is going to derail me the rest of the show. I
just imagining like my bare feet underneath.
sweating into the soles of your shoes. Also, you're showing so much ankle right now.
Yeah, man.
Only skinny white guys can do that. I don't understand.
Sorry, not being very modest.
You know what I just realized? You're not much of a flip-flop guy, are you?
No.
Why is that?
So
It's California, man.
I know. So I have a ridiculous and it doesn't make sense. So when I went to UCLA,
I can't wait to hear this.
for some reason, like everyone around me was like wearing flip flops. Well, not for some reason, but it's because it's Los
Southern
Angeles.
California.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's something about that like pitter pat sound that was like all around me, like a chorus, that just drove me insane. And so out of like rebellion, I stopped wearing flip flops.
Okay.
But I wear sandals all the time, like around the house and stuff like that. So I just
You'll put your dirty feet into those shoes without socks on?
I don't know.
I don't understand your people.
I can't. It doesn't make sense. I know. It's
don't
just like a weird thing for me.
Because it's right now, I mean, it feels like it might as well be flip-flop weather right now for us.
I have to keep telling myself that it's not April or May. That it's
Yeah.
actually
It's like
February.
the only place, I think, in the entire nation that is not
Yeah.
under siege by cold weather
Yeah.
is, the farthest west coast of California
Mhm.
and like the very southern brim of the United States.
Yeah.
Like the parts that touch Mexico.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
And, but everybody else is freezing.
Yeah. Literally.
Oh man, too soon.
I mean,
It's just too soon.
that's what's
man.
happening.
Well, that's usually me who makes that mistake.
yeah.
All right, go ahead. Let's
people-
test it out. Let's flex it. Let's see if we get any in the comments section this week.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just being literal. People actually are freezing, and it's sad, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So Texas is.
so
what
I
you're
want to
talking
talk about the Texas polar vortex.
What's a polar vortex, Andrew?
So I had no clue. I actually took in college a weather class basically because I had to do it. I had to like fill in the credits sort of thing, and it was like this dude. The professor was like this dude who knew like way too much about this stuff, and it was like his burning passion was like weather patterns.
It's like talking to your dad about drainage.
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or my brother about being outside. or
Yeah,
something like
exactly.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, this is something that you guys care a lot about. So I'm in there barely paying attention and trying to just get. So I don't. But there were some things from that class that I looked up basically what is a polar vortex because I have no idea what this is. Is it just like a touch of Narnia
Gosh,
snow?
I can't believe you don't even know. Go ahead, tell us.
You can't believe I don't know.
I can't believe you don't know what a polar vortex
I know,
is.
it's like-
So go ahead.
So basically, and I'm probably gonna get something wrong. At the North Pole of the Earth, there's like this ring. There's like this. Imagine like a disc on top of like cold air.
Yeah.
And when outside of that is another perimeter of like warmer air. And I guess if some of that warmer air happens to push into the disk, some of that cold air needs to push out of it. It's like a replacing area sort of thing.
Okay, I can visualize that.
Yeah. So basically, for some reason, there's a.
I mean, yeah, I know.
There was warm air pushing in, and it all pushed out into the middle of America, basically. So normally, like the top of Canada is super duper like this cold, right?
Yeah.
And now because of this, it like pushed into
most
the
of the
lower
US.
48, and man, it's so there's like in Texas in the last week or two there were temperatures that recorded the same.
So why the focus on
as-
Texas? Wouldn't it be like, aren't other states experiencing this as well?
So yes, and I actually don't know the answer to that question, but I think based on what I've seen in the last week and some of the controversy and some of the upset about this issue was that, North and South Dakota,
We expect to be cold.
they're all
up
set
there.
to be cold. Yeah. Colorado's set to be cold or whatever.
Nobody expects to be freezing their tail off in Dallas.
In Dallas, and they get cold. They get snow and occasionally, but not like. I mean, the temperatures in Alaska and Texas are the same, and it's like that doesn't happen.
That's not right. That ain't right.
Yeah. So unfortunately,
you got a bunch of people down there near the Alamo going, "Oh, not what's going on down here?"
Yeah, and so unfortunately, it's not their whole life and their whole water infrastructure isn't set. So you have people.
So millions lost power.
Millions lost power.
In fact, so we were just reading before we went on air, 500,000 still without power.
Yeah.
14 million people or so were instructed to boil their water because they lost access to clean water.
Yeah, it was a boil water order.
A boil water
which is
order.
we're just so used to mandated orders now.
And several million are still being under that boil water order, which is kind of weird.
It's so weird. Well, and the big thing was all the pipes that froze or burst. And so you'd see pictures of homes with water pipes like completely frozen. So they'd have to get the ice and boil it, I guess, to get any water to drink.
Oh my gosh.
Which is really horrible. And
about 80 people have died. They said it'll take a while to know exactly how many people have died from this thing.
Yeah.
But at least 80 confirmed deaths.
Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people they're just finding them in their homes, unfortunately. And as things melt and as the dust settles, I'm sure they'll unfortunately find more people who have passed away that way. And it's really. So it's Texas, but there's also record cold in other warmer places. Oklahoma, as well, as you said. It affected weather patterns in other states. So North Carolina had a deadly tornado that hit. Snow fell hard in Chicago, in Greece and Turkey. I guess it affected over there as well.
North Florida.
Yeah. And so it's been really interesting how this weather pattern actually touches a lot of people, but what we've been hearing about is Texas, because
and here we're sitting putting sunscreen on, and playing baseball,
playing baseball, coaching and playing baseball, and so I guess because actually what this really made me think of, although it's a little bit different and nuanced, is all the fires we've had in Northern California as well. Since 2017, it's been a yearly thing.
It's like a season now.
It is, yeah. And
where things are going to burn down, smoke is going to pollute the air, and you can't go outside because you're under these spare the air orders.
And it's and I something that's interesting too is there's a lot of, obviously people are hurt, are angry, are upset, and this is how it happened in California too, which is who's to blame for this. And so,
what's funny, because in Texas, I was reading this morning in my newspaper, you can tell your wife to go jump off a cliff making fun of me for reading a newspaper. But anyways, Texas has a totally different arrangement. Their electricity is provided to them in like a retail arrangement. It's not like a government utility. So that's part of the whole blame game right now, which is, should we be this is why we should have the government in control, and or whatever.
Well,
it's playing
California. Well, it's funny.
California knows that doesn't solve your problems.
Well, PG&E just has a monopoly on all of the California power and stuff, and so.
So then you have one person to blame.
That's right. And we did. So, So, but it's I know people personally who were affected by the fires, and it's I guess what when it becomes that close to home, you think of the other people in other parts of the country who are no one planned for this, no one expected this, and this is just unfortunately life happening, chance happening, and so I guess all I wanted to talk about today was acknowledging the pain and the suffering that these people are going through, but also like, how are we to think about these sorts of things? Because they are chance events. They are quote unquote rare occurrences, but they do. I mean, clearly they happen a lot more than we might like to believe. So
yeah, I mean, I think our response is either it tends to be towards stuff like this, you know, absent the gospel tends to be pretty binary.
Yeah.
You know, which is total indifference.
Right.
Or we're going to save the earth.
Yes.
And we need to save the earth.
Yeah.
And I just don't think either of those two responses actually satisfy the you know, the what the heck's going on.
Yeah. No, for sure. Because I mean, and both sides of that can be true too, in the sense that should we steward the earth? Like, yes, we should. We should try to. Even if we did it perfectly, nature happens. Yeah. Stuff happens.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Let's talk about that first, I guess, which is like, should we steward the earth?
Yeah.
So
it depends on what we mean by that, I'm sure.
Okay. Well, so here's my argument. Genesis 2:15 says this. He put them in the garden or in the land. Okay. He put them in the land to work it. Okay. We like that part as Christians because it fits with our politicized idealisms of Christianity in the West, okay?
Productivity,
capitalism,
industry,
all that, yeah. It's very industrious. We're supposed to work the land, okay? But then it follows up with this very interesting Hebrew word that most English Bibles translate as keep it. Now that word keep it in the Hebrew gets translated a bunch of different ways, but the two predominant ones are to guard it, to preserve it.
Yeah.
So the language there seems to be pretty decisive, which is you're not just supposed to work the land, but you're also supposed to guard it and preserve it. So we have typically umbrellaed this biblical idea under the word stewardship, but stewardship encompasses a lot of things. Yeah. So it's actually, you know, but specifically here, what we want to say is we're stewards of the earth. So we're managers of the earth. We're protectors. We're preservers of the earth. So that's not in conflict with a Christian worldview or a biblical paradigm. And I don't know why so many Christians make that a political issue. Like, we can't believe that. That's what liberals believe or whatever, you know. And, you know, we can't save the earth. Okay. Well, that's a whole different Bible question.
Totally. Yeah.
Whether we can save it is different from whether we should protect it and preserve it.
Yeah. One of the arguments I hear mostly about as a counter to, you know, thoughts about preserving the earth is, you know, the earth is passing, the ground is cursed and the earth is passing away. Yeah. And the new one is coming. Yeah. And it's like, okay, I don't disagree with that. Yeah. I think that that's biblical and true. I think how we act in the meantime matters, though.
But that's us wanting to get back to binary again, man, which is like either or. It's either passing away and we can't save it, or, you know, we're Berkeley hippies.
You know, and it's so unfortunate that those are the two.
And it's not. It's both and. A lot of the Bible is both and. Yes, it is passing away. And I would also say, yes, we cannot save it.
Right.
Now, the other side doesn't like that part of it.
No.
That we can't save it. No, we know from the Bible that it has been placed under the indignity and futility of sin along with us. The Bible uses verses that say things like it's literally like groaning and crying out under the futility of sin. And it will, in the end, not be preserved as we know it.
Right. Or as it will not be restored to how it was. Yeah. At least in this.
Not in this sense. It's right. Yeah. So you can't save it. There is someone who can.
Right.
Again, another conversation, but you can't save it. No amount of recycling, solar panels, electric cars is going to save the planet. But that's not the imperative for doing those things.
That's right. That's right.
The imperative for doing those things is because we were told to. Yeah. To preserve it, to be stewards of it. Yeah.
I mean, you could think of it the same way as, you know, one's body as well. Yeah. You know, like you're going to die anyway. Yeah. But do you want to?
Should I be eating sticks of butter every day?
That's right.
You know, and be like, oh man, eggs Benedict every morning.
That's right. That sounds great, but
yeah, I know.
So it's kind of a similar principle in that, like, of course, you're wasting away. Your body is decaying over time, but you can either, steward and preserve and protect it.
Yeah.
In one way, or you can just.
Well, it's like my dad lives up here now.
Yeah.
Okay. So we moved him into a facility up here, and he's getting old. Mm-hmm. Dad, if you're listening, I'm sorry. He's gonna die. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, I why should I take care of you? Mm-hmm. I mean, you're like, clock's ticking.
Yeah.
Well, because the imperative for taking care of him is not to try and necessarily keep him alive.
No.
It's to be a job as a steward, as a son, as a caretaker of my father. I'm imaging something. I'm modeling something.
Yeah, and you're obeying the command to honor your father.
Yeah. So those are our imperatives for being, let's not call it environmentalists, but for being good stewards of the earth, good caretakers of the earth, are rooted firmly in the gospel and scripture.
Yeah.
Not outcome orientation.
Right. I mean, this is it'd be interesting to have my brother talk about this too, because this is his whole job. And he and I have talked about this quite a bit. And one of the things that's so disheartening, but it's just true, is that, not only is the earth subjected to sin and groaning, but it's filled with sinful people that, don't care about this part of, it's like whatever it takes to get a short-term gain. Like there are for all the, California efforts to like live green and all that stuff. Yeah. There are other states within our nation that don't see it that way. Yeah. And then if you go outside to other parts of the world, there are whole nations that are like, we don't. They're just like billowing greenhouse gases,
pumping things into the ocean.
It's all in the name of
industry.
Of industry, And so it's like.
And then the weird part is though, like stewardship. Like, I was thinking about this the other day. Like, it doesn't fall upon party lines the way we think it does sometimes. Yeah. Because like Zach and I took this epic road trip this summer, and we ended up at Yellowstone National Park. And let me tell you something. Places like Montana and Wyoming care tremendously about how you treat the land and how you figure out how to live in balance with the land.
Yeah. For sure.
And arguably do it way better than Californians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Montana is a red state,
right?
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know this for sure. I'm guessing, but a place like that is very rural. Perhaps that's a value that's passed through generations in a way that it isn't in other places, like where it is more of a sort of like an ideal instead of like a discipline and a practice. Where a place like Montana might be like all this around you, like we need to like.
We're responsible for
this. Yeah, that's the best way to say it. Yeah. So, it's just interesting to think about. And,
don't take more than what you need from the land.
Right.
Like there are lots of places in the United States that still live and view that way, and they are predominantly in red states.
Yeah. Which doesn't
fit the narrative.
Little binary political.
It doesn't. It doesn't fit the narrative.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't. I think. Our aversion or attraction to, good environmental practices is, for most Christians has to be largely informed by scripture, not by culture, because the culture is constantly at odds with its own idealisms, just like we were just talking about.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man.
I think we talk about this a lot, or at least I feel we do. It's like so much energy and noise and volume about like what's happening out there and should not be. And very oftentimes I find very little personal conviction about like, okay, I may not be able to control all these policies or what all these other people think, but like, how can I contribute or at least be a good steward in my own sphere of influence. And that it's not going to save the world, like you said, but at least it's a bit more biblical response, I think.
It is, because the earth and all of its inhabitants, the Bible tells us, belongs to the Lord.
Right.
Well, and if that's true, then I'm just a renter, and I need to make sure that I get my security deposit back.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
So I'm just a renter, man. I got to take care of this place. It's like husbands have this mandate to, like, to same thing, to cultivate, curate, and steward the wives that God has given them.
Yeah.
For similar reasons, because one day you're going to present her back to whom she really belongs to.
Yep.
So in what condition will you be returning her?
That's right.
That's a frightening thing to think about,
Yeah, that you are accountable to a holy and righteous God for how you stewarded that opportunity. And that's a huge, man, if we lived in light of that moment, we would do so much better in terms. We would let a lot less slide than we do typically. So
the funny thing is, I think most people know that I grew up in East LA, and I never thought about the environment. I was the first to, like, throw stuff up my car window, and, like, I just that was not ever part of the practice, even though it was part of the worldview in some manner of speaking. I did not actually start to care about stewardship, one, until I became a Christian, and two, until I got exposed to places like Louisiana and Florida, where they just do a better job taking care of their land than we do in California, or at least the parts of California that I've been exposed to.
Yeah, interesting. See, I've never lived anywhere else, so it's so interesting to me to hear that, because I actually I have no idea. It's all conjecture or stereotype.
Yeah, it is, and that's part of the problem.
Right.
That conjecture and stereotype feeds into narratives, and those narratives create polarities, and then those polarities make us unable to have these conversations. How much have we been talking about this for like a year now? That these polarities are making it impossible for us to have conversations.
Yeah, totally.
Whether it's about race or vaccines or whatever. How did we let this issue become a politics issue?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I know. It's really...
Don't crap where you eat is a basic principle,
Yeah, I know. It seems pretty elementary, but unfortunately, So this thing in Texas is really, and it just made me think about all sorts of natural disasters that and I found a really good, I don't want to read a lot of it, but a really good article on the Gospel Coalition by a guy named Jeff Robinson.
I don't know him.
Yeah, I don't either. And it was written a few years ago, and I forget the name of the article, but basically there's two ideas I kind of wanted to end on with this thing.
Yeah.
And it's because I think it's when this stuff happens, Christians, I think, feel awkward, because it's like, we know God's in control, and we know God is ultimately
good. But the world
good,
seems out of control.
But the world seems out of control, and so he had two really good. He had a lot of things in his article, but I wanted to highlight these two things. And the first one was this, which is to speak only where God has spoken. And what he means by that, I'll read a little bit here. An example is, attempting to read providence is unwise and dangerous. I thought that was a really good point. So, like, and his example was, in the aftermath of 9/11, some presumed to speak on God's behalf, assuring listeners the terrorist attacks were divine retribution for national sins. Might that have been true? That's up to God. We simply don't know. God never told us. And so I think Christians can do a lot of harm when talking about these things that especially come like national news. And it's like, why does this happen? Well, sit down. Let me tell you why it happened. And what his point is, don't speak where God hasn't
spoken.
Yeah.
He speaks generally about
Right.
why these things happen. He does not speak to the we don't have Sodom and Gomorrah answers anymore where he's speaking to specific natural disasters.
Yeah. Now you're right, and that's a good point, because he does speak generally to things like this.
Yeah.
But we don't have the wisdom and the foresight to say, because this happened in Texas, or because these fires happened,
God is angry.
God is angry, and here's why he's angry. That's extremely presumptuous and not helpful.
Not helpful and potentially sinful.
Right. Yeah. And another quote on that same train of thought is, Christians usually wind up looking foolish when they predict specific dates for Jesus' return, as well as when they try to read providence. And so to not speak when
as far as I know, everyone who's predicted Jesus' return has been wrong.
It's been pretty wrong. Yeah.
As far as I know, because we're still here.
Yeah. So I thought that was a very good pastoral word and a reminder in times like this.
That is good.
But I thought he balanced it really well by also saying, allow these events to preach to us also about that life matters, life is fragile.
Life matters, that creation is groaning, and that there will be a restoration of all things in the end, not in the way that they are now, but in a way that's better and sustainable. Which is really, that's the language, right? We want sustainable, renewable resources. It's coming.
Yes. Yeah.
It's coming, and it's coming in the gospel. It's coming in his second advent. It's coming in the new heavens and new earth. It's coming.
Yeah. And like both things can be true, that like we can weep with those who weep and mourn with those who mourn.
Yeah.
And pray and support victims of natural disasters like these, wherever and we can also, without dehumanizing that pain and suffering, take a look at our own life and our own fatality.
Yeah.
Let it be a reminder to us that, every breath we take is a gift. And, as we talk about stewarding everything we've been given.
That's right.
It's our own life that we have to steward as well. And so,
all right. Well, here's the strange thing. There's this huge, polar vortex going on, that's affecting the world, and specifically the U.S. There is a global pandemic raging on right now. A vaccine rollout that has not lived up to snuff. All sorts of political things are happening, including the appointment of a new attorney general. Why then is the cover of the Wall Street Journal, Tiger Woods gets into a car accident?
That is a good question. Man. I have a few ideas.
Well, I'd like to hear them because I'm like, this is the cover?
Yeah.
I'm not saying maybe it shouldn't have been reported on, but this is the cover of the Wall Street Journal, which is like a huge national magazine.
Yeah.
This is the most important thing today.
Right. Yeah.
And apparently it was.
I think, so we've talked a little bit, I think, about celebrity culture and how like this. Yeah. We kind of like when we were talking about.
Well, hold on, real quick. So for people who don't know, Tiger Woods got into. So apparently he was driving like a Genesis something, basically a very expensive car. Yeah. And because he's Tiger Woods, and by all accounts thus far, he was not intoxicated. He had not been drinking, no drugs in his system. He was just driving too fast. And he, careened into a medium and then ended up flipping over like 14 times, crushed different parts of his legs, including his ankle. He had surgery today, I think. Got rushed to, UCLA Harbor, and they had to pull him out the front windshield because they couldn't get him out the doors because they were so crushed. So now the question is this guy ever going to play golf again? Yeah. Because they want to see him break Jack Nicklaus's record, which is what people really care about. Yeah. Or at least a lot of people really care about. They want to see this guy keep doing great things, which we talked a little bit about with Tom Brady. Right. And so now he's dominating headline news right now. In the wake of all of the things going on in the world, everyone's writing about Tiger Woods and this accident. Will he play? Why? What's going on?
Yeah. Well, I think it really does tie in nicely to our Brady conversation, in that there's something about, and you just touched on it, seeing greatness in action.
Yeah.
And even if you're right, wrong, or indifferent, how you feel about the person, it's like, wow, it's amazing to see people do things on the golf course or the football field that we could never do, and to continue to achieve.
What do you think the thing is with Tiger Woods? He's a golfer. Like, golf has historically not been a sexy sport to write about or publish about. And like Tiger Woods has an aura about him that is not too dissimilar from Michael Jordan and, the Tom Brady's of the world. Like, what is it? How did that happen with a golfer? What's the recipe there?
Well, I think, I'm not a very learned golf fan. I don't follow it that much.
But that's the point.
But
nobody did.
I know who he is.
And yet still to this day, he's the biggest draw on the PGA Tour. Anytime he plays, the TV ratings triple and attendance doubles.
Wow.
So like, he's still like, there's something about this guy, even after all of his scandals and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
And, and I'm like, what is that thing?
Yeah.
And I think it was just, people want to watch greatness no matter where it is.
Yeah. Well, and he started so young and was so good so quickly too, and so dominant so quickly. I do know that about him. And and when that happens, it grabs everyone's attention.
Yeah.
And it's.
Do you think also that there's like a little bit of like, we want to talk about something else? So
that was going to be my second thing. Was I think like we try to find things that aren't politics or vaccine related. Anyone who's
which is not going well.
It's not going well. We tried really hard, and now we're just like, whatever. But I think that part of that is true. Is it's like finally something to put on the front page that is not all of this same stuff. I think there's definitely something, and it's something else to think about. It's horrible.
Yeah, vaccine rollout sucks. Hey, do you think Tiger Woods is going to play golf again?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you're like in a mundane work day, and you're like trying to find something to distract you, and it's like anything will do is an excuse.
You're like, oh, the coffee maker's broke.
That's right. Yeah.
Hey, get Jim over here. It's like, why are you championing this? You have work to do.
I know. In college, my dorm or my apartment was always cleanest during midterm week, because it's like, well, I can't study if there's dishes to do. And
anything to avoid the studying.
I sort of think, without belittling the horror of the accident, but it is interesting because the news is about, we just passed the 500,000 death mark for COVID in America, and it's like now it's this other life that's like, look at this guy, and he didn't even die, as horrible as this was.
He didn't die. He was badly injured, which we don't. You're right. We don't mean to bemoan that.
No.
But
that juxtaposition is very fascinating.
Mm-hmm. I think so, which is why I brought it up.
Yep.
I'm like, this is so weird. I think we need a distraction bad is what's going on.
Well, and the other sad truth of it is, and this is horrible, but I'm going to say it, unless you knew one of those 500,000, to most people,
you desensitize yourself. Yeah, it's it's math to a lot of people.
Faceless people that passed away, which is horrible. And we know from biblical worldview, absolutely not true.
Yeah.
But to a lot of people.
But to the average American?
But they know who Tiger Woods is.
I know who he is. Right. That's a name and a face that I know.
Right.
So now there's a different level of caring that's going on. That's actually, I wasn't even planning to talk about this, but that's actually a good, interesting, like, worldview consideration, which is like, how do we as Christians care about people who we don't care about?
Yeah.
Because here we are throwing Tiger Woods on the front page because we got a name and a face, and it's somebody that we've watched his whole career.
Right.
And we did not give the same amount of attention to the 500,000 mark for people that we don't know, but we should care.
Right.
Because they're actually dead.
Yeah.
And he's not.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, I think that kind of goes into evangelism and mission and like, why, how do, you know, unless it's personal, like we tend to be indifferent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't want to misquote the stats, but I did read some articles about the 500 mark and 500,000 mark. And, you know, that's more than this war and this war and this, and it's like, it's just crazy to think about that. And, you know, like we think of these wars as like the pinnacle of human death. And it's like in the last year, we have surpassed that. And
you just forwarded the elders a letter from somebody who lost someone to COVID. And it was so, I don't know, there's something eerie about the email and the way that it was written, you know, and I don't know, made it more personal for me anyways. And, you know, and for us, we have to care about, we as Christians have to care about pain and suffering wherever it is.
Yeah, that's it.
Not just where it interests us the most. We, you know, empathy is an incredibly important part of the Christian life. Not just sympathy, but being able to actually empathize with other human beings who are hurting, because we have all been hurting in some manner of speaking. We have all suffered in some manner of speaking. So we have to learn to use that empathy and service to other people, because that's a heartbeat of the gospel.
It is,
Is a Savior who enters into humanity and empathizes with our suffering, and then delivers us from it. And so we cannot possibly be good missionaries or Christians if we don't know how to empathize. And that's hard, because this culture sucks at empathy.
Sucks at empathy.
And knows how to be victims, but it's really bad at empathy.
Well, and has such a high value on, like, death in America is very different than death in other countries in terms of how we face it, how we deal with it.
Pretty sanitized.
I'm just talking to Joel about this, who goes to our church and used to work at a mortuary. And just his whole experience with that is so eye-opening, and how transactional it can be in American culture as opposed to other cultures where, you know, and even in the last 100 years, it's changed greatly, you know. Americans
tend to want, somebody's died, all right, let's have a funeral, that's an event, and then let's move on. And other cultures just don't do that. They face death head on.
Or, you know, one thing I have heard before is, you know, back in the day, 100 years ago, people died in their homes with their family around them. It was very up close and personal.
I have this distinct memory that, you know, they don't do it as much anymore, again, because I think the West tries to sanitize death. But, you know, we did, I grew up Catholic, so it was very common to have a viewing the night before the funeral. In other words, in the house of the family. So when my grandmother died, we all went over to my grandparents' house, made food, people drank beer, drank wine, had tacos, had, you know, great, fantastic carne asada or carnitas, and, you know, there was some laughing. And in the middle of the room, and I'm just a kid, is an open casket with my grandmother in it.
Which, like, we're both smiling right now.
I know.
It's like, that's
because it's unsettling.
Well, and it's so, it's.
So I remember as a kid, like, while people weren't paying attention, walking up and, like, wanting to touch my grandmother, or to be more accurate, to touch a dead body. And I was just so startled by how rigid and cold she was. But she was made up. She was dressed in her Sunday best. You wouldn't have known. She looked like she was just sleeping until you touched her. And that stuck with me for a long time. Now, people say today we shouldn't do that to kids. That's not a good idea, you know. And so we sanitize it. We don't face death. We don't. But I don't know, man. I think my family would say that the way they do it and did it helped them grieve and process and celebrate. And not desensitize themselves to my grandmother's death by doing it that way.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, right? Is no matter how you slice it, death is a loss, and death is sad, and death requires grieving on behalf of those who cared for the person who died, and trying to speed past that it may feel more convenient in the time, but there's something missing from the process there, and I think that comes out in other ways later. But it's definitely and so then for Christians, even though we don't know personally the 500,000 or the people in Texas, we are still called to care and to care
and to slow down, to try to not just. Oh, okay. 80 people in Texas died. Oh, okay. 500,000 people, you know, in some manner of speaking, were affected by COVID, which then led to a death. So, you know, that's not a small number. So it's like, but our tendency is, like you said, to go, Tiger Woods. I know him. I care. I'm interested in his well-being. And so I think there's something to learn from that about everything that's going on right now, which is like, okay, now you see how empathy works.
100%.
So I think that's a good place to stop, maybe. And I think, I don't know, for some reason right now I feel compelled to say a little prayer. And then maybe we can end that way. Is that all right?
Sounds great, man.
Man, Lord, we just pray for everyone who is affected by so many of these things that seem to be chaos. The virus, polar vortexes, all the way down to just, you know, a burglary gone wrong. But Lord, specifically for the aforementioned, God, that, you know, may we just be reminded today that you are sovereign, that you are in control. We don't know why you have allowed these things. We just trust that in the end, the restoration and resurrection of all things will be sufficient answer for us. Especially in light of our sin and responsibility for this world. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. See you next week.
See ya.